And the thing is, I do believe there was talk about these things. I believe if we study history, the Confederates were able to shoot pterodactyls, back in the Civil War, and they spread these things out. Anybody can look it up online.
Google it
They
yourself.
spread these things out, and this is a historical fact. So, they spread this thing out, and it's got a huge winglet. It was a pterodactyl they shot. So, of course, these things have been around. Now, they went extinct, obviously, slowly, but surely. And so,
what I'm saying is Jesus wrote a dinosaur to work. That's history. It's in the Bible. How to Train Your Dragon.
Historical facts.
And if you don't believe it, do your own research. Pull up Google. You'll find the picture, I promise.
Oh my God.
Thank you, John Gleason, godless engineer, for gifting me this beautiful moment. Y'all remember when they tried to cancel Steven Spielberg for posing with an animatronic triceratops animal rights activist?
Back it up.
Hit it from the back.
Cloaca. Historical facts.
Eat my ass, BP. You're down here bailing on the rest of us because you don't want to process your grief and shame like a normal person by drinking and mistreating strangers.
No, Rick. It is you who must nibble my cloaca, or bird asshole.
Everyone knows what a cloaca is.
back in the Civil War, and they spread these things out. Anybody can look it up online. They spread these things out, and this is a historical fact. So, they spread this thing out, and it's got a huge winglet. It's a pterodactyl they shot. So, of course, these things have been around. Now, they went extinct, obviously, slowly, but surely. And so,
Paul Bunyan was sharing some Funyuns with his pet velociraptor.
Whoa.
Oh, you thought it was an ox? Roll back the clock. Let me knock the socks off. Historical facts.
I didn't cut out. You heard me. Are you a pervert or something? Okay.
Hello, the pervert or something is live streaming again tonight, and we're going live with Dr. Josh. Thank you so much, Dr. Josh, for being on the show this weekend. I know this kind of came up, during the week, so I'm glad that you were able to get on the show with me.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me, and I love that intro. I don't know if I said that the last time I was on here, but I just. It's awesome.
Yeah. So if you guys don't know, tonight we're going to be talking about a Paul Copan interview that was just recently streamed on Praise I Am's channel. And we're going to be addressing some specific sections. Some of them are longer than others. We'll probably stop in the middle of some of them. But we're going to try to hit, as much as we can in the time that we have. So they are talking about chattel slavery in the Bible, as well as just general, I guess maybe violence, sexual violence that occurs in the Bible a little bit. So we're going to be going through that, and we're going to be discussing like how counter to scholarship it kind of seems like both of them are being. And if you guys don't know, Dr. Josh has a lot of great books, especially on topics such as this. Dr. Josh has the Does the Bible Condone Slavery? The short answer is yes, it does. And now you've got 2 volumes of the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament out that everybody should read. And I will have links to those in the description. As we go throughout the night tonight, and while Josh is blowing y'all's minds with information, I'll try to get all of those links put in the description. So y'all be sure to continuously refresh, on into the interview tonight. But Dr. Josh, do you want to tell, in case people don't know who you are, do you want to tell everybody who you are and where they can find you and everything like that?
Yeah, sure. So Joshua Bowen, I have a PhD in Assyriology from Johns Hopkins. I minored in Hebrew Bible as well. because I was an evangelical Christian for 26 years. So I got a bachelor's and a master's in theology in, Hebrew Bible, Old Testament studies. So I have a lot of background in the Hebrew Bible and now in the ancient Near East. Megan runs a YouTube channel called Digital Hammurabi. She is blowing up currently, which is kind of crazy. So I kind of help out there from time to time, but I do stuff like this, sort of help out as I am able in the community when people can actually use my sometimes narrow expertise. But yeah, but all our books are on Amazon. If you just search Joshua Bowen.
Yeah, you could search Joshua Bowen, or if y'all will wait just a little bit, I am working on getting all of those links in the description right now. So just keep looking out for that. I really should have had them all in there beforehand, but I'm lazy as shit.
Or busy.
busy is more like it. Yeah, I was editing up a video pretty much all day today. So let's. I'm getting one in there right now. Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament.
And that thing is, so I went on, Seth Andrews did the audio version for both volumes 1 and 2, which is really the reason that it's popular. I mean, let's just say it, It
was popular way before that.
He is just, I went on his podcast, and I think it released yesterday or the day before. And I mean, the audiobook sales are doing really, I mean, all the sales are doing pretty well, but yeah, he is so good at making mouth.
At making mouth? That
Sorry.
sounds dirty.
It's supposed to be a Brooklyn Nine-Nine quote. I'll be sure to make better mouth.
Okay.
But anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we've both KC and I have listened to Seth Andrews reading through volume 1, and it's great to hear him reading because he's got a great radio voice.
Yes,
because I mean that's what he did for the longest time, so it makes sense.
Yeah. People have been asking if I'll do a chapter or something in Kent Hovind's voice, which I don't know why anyone would want that. Why would you?
Oh, come on. You know exactly why everybody wants that. Because you do such a phenomenal voice.
See, this is a criticism to me, G. I don't... It's not a good thing. How's that a good thing? Just kidding.
Well, I mean, come on. So we're about to get to the video real quick as soon as I get this other link in there.
For people that don't know, maybe I can just talk about who Paul Copan is. If you don't know, Paul Copan is a very popular, I don't remember what his PhD is in. That's terrible. I should have looked at that before I came in here. But he has a book out that's, he's got several. I think he's got 2 more coming out, or one recently came out. But the really popular one is God a Moral Monster? And he essentially goes through, and it's pretty standard apologetics through things like violence and genocide and slavery and all these things that John Collins, when he wrote his book in 2018 or 19 about what are biblical values, it's like they're talking about the same things, right? And he's trying to explain things like, why is it that God would say kill all the Amalekites, including the infants and suckling babies, right? Like, why would he do that? And so he went on to Praise his channel and gave an interview. I haven't actually watched it, but I've read through some of the transcript. I kind of wanted it to be a little fresh and surprising for me, just so it could be kind of genuine. But yeah, he's a super nice guy. Like I've had a conversation with him on Skylar Fiction's channel. But of course I disagree fundamentally with a lot of things that he says. So
Yeah, you're obviously going to be a lot nicer to him than I would be. So there's that. But I'm glad that you've got a good rapport with him. So we got a super chat here saying Dr. Josh doing a chapter in Kent Hovind voice. Yes, please.
I mean, if I could get Cynthia McDonald to sing a chapter, you know what I mean? Like that would sell. That would sell. She sang it better for like 30 seconds, and I wanted to stand up and cheer. Like, of course, it was in the middle of her talk, so it really wouldn't have worked that way. But beautiful voice. Anyway, sorry, Cynthia. I hope that didn't embarrass you.
I mean, I heard her sing too, and I think that she shouldn't be embarrassed about singing. All right, so we do have a good bit to get through here tonight with the interview that Copan did. Yes, thank you, sugar. My glucose is high. All right, sorry about that. Okay, so let me get to the first little bookmarky point that I have here. And we can just we can start. It's going to start in with praise. He's going to kind of set the scene for what we're talking about. And Josh, if you want me to stop at any certain point, you just let me know, and I'll pause it. Okay. Also, make sure that you can hear it when it plays, because if you can't hear it, then nobody else can hear it either.
This is sort of a three-pronged question, so we'll take it, part by part. So I'll set this up by saying many biblical skeptics go to Leviticus 25, 44 through 46 to support their charge of chattel slavery in the Bible. However, the Hebrew makes the case in verses 45 through 47 that the Toshavs, the sojourners, could not only wax rich, but these same Toshavs were co-business partners with Israel in hiring Aved servants. Would that immediately dispel the charge of chattel slavery in Leviticus 25 to you?
Sure. Now, Josh, do you know what Praise is talking about here exactly? Because when I listened to this at first, I mean, I understand what Praise is asking. I guess it's like, hey, does this particular aspect disprove the idea that Leviticus 25, 44 through 46 could be talking about chattel slavery? And I don't know what the thing he's talking about is. Exactly.
Is it possible to put Leviticus 25, 44 to like 47 up on the screen? And it can be in English, like English.
Yeah, I can get that for you. Just 1 second.
So, this is an argument that it comes up frequently, but only online. You don't really see this, and I don't know that I've ever seen this in academic circles. And there's a reason why, and it's because like fundamentally, it just the syntax of the text it's not what it says. So I'll explain it, hopefully, and if it's not clear by the end, John, just make me explain it more.
Okay. Did you need 47, or is just 46 all you need, or did you?
Can you put 47 up as well?
Yes,
is that possible? Sorry.
1 second.
Okay. So what's going on here? And you'll notice there's a break the heading that they put in the text, right? Obviously, that's not there in the Hebrew, but there's a reason that whatever translation this is has that in there.
ESV. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, it's fine. Not. It won't matter. So in Leviticus 25, particularly in this section, starting down in like 35 in particular, it starts to go this way. The text is dealing with how should Israelites engage with other Israelites becoming poor and destitute. So the chapter has a huge thing about the year of Jubilee and the setting all the people back to their property and canceling all debts. it's trying to look out for, at least it seems like on the surface, it is trying to look out for and provide for the Israelites, right, to make sure that they don't get oppressed. Now, just as an aside, Bruce Wells has written an article recently about anti-cretic pledges that seems to suggest that maybe this was sort of an underhanded, sneaky way of making things better for the creditor, but it doesn't matter. But that's what's going on here. So there are like phases that the Israelites can fall into greater and greater poverty. And so they can like, they sell some of their land. They end up like running out of money and have to take loans. And then finally they run out of land and money, and now they have to sell themselves as slaves. So what are the other Israelites supposed to do with fellow Israelites? Well, at every step, they're supposed to treat them well, right? They're supposed to, in fact, in starting in verse 39, it says, essentially, if an Israelite becomes so poor that he has to sell himself, you don't treat him as a slave. You're not allowed to treat him as a slave anymore, which is different if anybody is, out there watching. Exodus 21, Deuteronomy 15, these are earlier texts. They explicitly tell you how, like what the rules are for keeping an Israelite as an eved, the Hebrew word for slave. But here in Leviticus 25, it says no. Okay, so then the question arises in the text, well, if you're going to get slaves, where do you get them from? This is where 44 to 46 comes in, so I'll just read it real quick. As for your male and female slaves whom you may have, you may buy male and female slaves from among the nations that are around you. Now in the Hebrew here, the word is the goyim. If anybody's like a goy, like a Gentile, these are the nations that are around Israel. Then verse 45, you may also buy from among the strangers who sojourn with you. So the word that's used in here is, and it's the word that Praise said, it's toshav. Now, it comes from the Hebrew root yashav, which means to sit or to dwell. So a toshav is sort of like somebody that dwells, right? Somebody that's residing. Now, there's some debate about specifically what a toshav is. Meshar wrote an article, I think in maybe 2014. I don't remember. But like for the sake of argument, this is a foreigner probably. Meshar argues that it could also be an Israelite, but it doesn't matter. Or it doesn't have to necessarily be a foreigner. If I'm remembering his article correctly, but most likely here, a foreigner who is, and I would say almost certainly a foreigner that's dwelling in the land. And this is a tenant farmer, right? This is somebody that is not able to own land themselves, right? If you think about the land of Israel is divided up and the tribes get their portions. And so, foreigners, the Hebrew word ger, or nochri or toshav or any of these, foreigners, they can't own land, right, in Israel because it's already been apportioned to God's people. So what they can do is they can come in and rent a field from you. So John, let's say you're an Israelite, you own 10 acres of land. I come in, I'm a foreigner, and I say, hey, I'd like to rent out an acre of land to sow and to, cultivate. And I'm going to, with the anticipation that I'm going to yield a substantial crop and I'll be able to pay you the rent from a portion of it and then make money from the rest, right? So I'm renting out an acre from you. So if I do that, a person that is doing that is called a toshav, right? It's the argument. I think it's pretty compelling, but it's somebody that's residing in the land that's doesn't own the land. Okay, so when it says here, you may also buy from among the strangers who sojourn with you, it's talking about these toshavim, these toshavs, these tenant farmers that are living in the land. What happens if I default on my loan to you? Well, if I'm an Israelite and I default on my loan, John, you're not allowed as a fellow Israelite to treat me as an eved. You're not allowed to treat me as a slave. So then it says here, as for your male and female slaves whom you may have, you may buy male and female slaves from among the nations that are around you, and you may buy them from among the strangers that sojourn with you. So me, the foreigner, the toshav, you can take me as a slave, right? And they may be your property. Now, the question is here, what happens is down in verse 47, if a stranger or sojourner with you becomes rich, that's also the word toshav. The word toshav is used there. And what happens is people look at verse 45, they see the word toshav, and then they look down at verse 47 and they see the word toshav and they say, aha, the toshav in 45 is a slave. That means the toshav in 47 is a slave. Now let's just stop there for a second. When I come into Israel and I rent out, or I rent out a field from you, an acre from you, am I a slave, John?
I technically no. I don't think so.
I'm renting land from you. In fact, I may be independently wealthy. In fact, I think many of them were. I could have an awful lot of money. I just can't own land here, so I'm going to have to rent it out from you. I mean, shit, I might say to you, I'm going to rent all your land, right? I mean, that wouldn't work, but but I rent out a field. When do I become a slave? I am a toshav when I rent out that field and work it. That's who a toshav is.
Mm-hmm.
When do I become a slave? Well, when I default on my loan. But John, what if I don't default on my loan? What if actually I make a shit ton of money? What if I have this amazing like bumper crop or whatever? I mean, I'm not a agricultural guy, so sorry, I don't even, bumper crop might not be the right word there, but what if I make a whole bunch of, get a whole bunch of produce, make a whole bunch of money, and now, I mean, I'm just killing it out here. Mm-hmm. Am I a slave? No, I'm just this tenant farmer, and I'm doing really, really well. Now, if I don't do really well, John, you're allowed, if I default on my loan, you're allowed to take me as a slave. And you don't have to release me at the Jubilee. That's all that text is saying.
Okay.
In verse 47, it says, but if Josh, the toshav, the guy that, came and rented out the field, let's say I don't do what happens in verse 45. I don't actually default on my loan and have to be, sell myself to you and become a permanent slave, a chattel slave. Let's say that doesn't happen. Let's say actually I do really well. And look what I can do. If he becomes rich and your brother, an Israelite, so, let's say you got a brother named Jim or a friend that's an Israelite named Jim, and Jim becomes poor and I give him a loan because that's how wealthy I am. I give him a loan and he, an Israelite, defaults on the loan to me, right? He defaults on the loan that I gave him and I take him as a slave. See, what the text is doing, I probably should have just drawn this, but what the text is doing is the text is dealing essentially with if an Israelite, loses money, if an Israelite or loses land, if he loses all his money, and if he loses all his money and his land and has to sell himself as a slave, then in verse 47, what happens if he has to sell himself as a slave to a foreigner? That's what the text is doing here. So the point is that just because the same Hebrew word is used in 45 and 47, it would be like saying, man, I feel like I'm not being clear. Maybe in the audience, people could tell me if I'm being clear. John, do you think I'm being clear?
I mean, I think you're being clear. I mean, I followed you pretty well. That and maybe I can steel man it for you
that'd be great.
To see if I'm correct. So basically, Israelites are allowed to buy, chattel slaves from the nations around them, but also if a sojourner in the land, like a foreigner in the land, is like defaults on the loan or whatnot, that person can become a slave to the person that they own money to. But conversely, if they don't default on the loan, then I guess an Israelite can sell themselves into debt slavery to the foreigner.
Yeah, that's right. So option one, like scenario one, that was perfect. So like scenario one, if I'm Josh, the Edomite, right, or whatever, or the Moabite, or here I am a foreigner. It doesn't matter. I'm a foreigner, and I come into the land, and I rent out a field from you. Option one is what happens in 44 to 46. I take out that loan, rent out the field from you, and I can't pay it back, and I become a slave, a chattel slave to you. That's option one.
Right.
However, in alternative universe, right, I come into the land, Josh the foreigner, I rent out a field from you, and I actually kill it. I do really, really well. And I do so well that I'm able to give out loans to other Israelites who then default to me and become slaves to me. The law is saying, well, we know what the law says if an Israelite defaults to another Israelite. They can't treat him as a slave. They have to release him in the Jubilee. They work as a hired worker. But what happens if an Israelite has to sell himself to a foreigner?
Mm-hmm.
What is the law then? And that's what 47 and following is dealing with. So it's again, the misconception here is that toshav doesn't mean slave, right? A toshav can become a slave, but a toshav doesn't mean slave. It just means somebody is renting out a field from you. So a toshav can do really poorly and become a slave, or he could do really well and not become a slave. I mean, that's all this text is doing.
Right. So rereading what Praise is asking Paul Copan here, it kind of seems like Praise is asking him, hey, does this mean that the toshav are really co-business partners, as like to mean they're only debt slaves in a sense? And that totally refutes the idea that this is discussing any kind of chattel slavery.
Yeah, maybe I should steel man their argument. Yeah. What they're arguing is that, well, look, the toshav here becomes a slave in 45. But then in verse 47, he's making a ton of money. How can a slave make a ton of money? Well, it must not be slavery. This must be some sort of business partnership, right? You can't have a slave making a shit ton of money. That's not slavery. It must be something else. And what they're doing is they're saying in verse 45, where it says toshav, that must be the same person in the same circumstance as a now slave in 47. And that is not what it's doing. 45 is saying there are toshavs that do very poorly and have to sell themselves as slaves. There are also toshavs that do really well and can loan out money. That's what the text is talking about. It just because the word toshav there is used does not mean that they're always a slave, because they're not.
Right. I think I know why this didn't make a lot of sense to me, because I feel like that's a very strained interpretation of the passage. Because, I mean, even without knowing like the Hebrew behind it and everything like that, it's very obviously saying that you can buy, from the strangers among you. Not that the strangers are slaves already.
That's right.
Just that they can become slaves.
That's right.
Is what it said. Like grammatically, that's just what it says. I mean, in verse 45.
Switch it up, right? Let's say something. Say Israelites. Let's say this is supposed to. I mean, this will make it make sense, right? You may also buy, verse 45, from among the Israelites, right, and their clans, and they become your property, right? Verse 47, if an Israelite becomes rich, it doesn't mean that the same Israelite in 45 is now the Israelite in 47. It's not the same person. It's not Frank. Frank isn't there in 45 and now he's down in 47 as the slave. That's not how it works. it's saying there's like 100,000, let's say, just whatever, or let's say there's 1,000. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a more realistic number. So there's 5,000 toshavs that live in Israel. I know we're dealing with this a lot, but it's just such a big, stupid thing that comes up online. Right. Sorry, I shouldn't have said stupid, but a thing that is incorrect that comes up online.
I don't know, it kind of seems stupid to me.
Let's say there are 5,000 of these toshavs that are in the land and they're renting out fields. Some of them are going to do very poorly. And what happens if they do poorly and they default on the loans to the Israelites that have made the loans to them, to their creditors? They default to them. Well, they can become slaves of those Israelites. But what about these other ones that actually have really great, maybe they're in a slightly better part of the country that gets really great rainfall or whatever, and they actually have great crops and they very savvy businessmen, whatever, and they do really, really well. And they triple their profits, whatever. I'm not an economist, but now they are able to give out, they're really wealthy. These people have become slaves. These people have become wealthy, and now they're buying Israelites as slaves. What happens to those Israelites that are being bought as slaves? That's what the text is doing.
Okay.
Sorry if I over-explained or under-explained that.
No. I agree with you that's a very important aspect to get here, because it's very important to understand what's being asked, and two, what is the argument that it seems like Paul Copan is going to be, I guess, affirming, is what it seems like.
And if people in the audience need clarification, I feel like I just explained that terribly. Please ask. Or maybe don't, because you're like, I don't want to hear Josh talk about that anymore.
Listen, we do have a quick super chat from IL Goose, who says, Doc, I just finished reading volume 2, a slow reader. I absolutely love chapter 6 and 7, particularly the intertextuality sections. Hit me with volume 3.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We were up together at the Baja conference in Ontario. Hung out a lot. He's a really great guy. Thank you.
Awesome. So let's see what Paul Copan has to say about Praise's, I guess, argument against Leviticus 25:44 through 47.
Sure. I mean, what's interesting about all of this is that the same sort of language that's used for, say, acquiring these foreign servants is also the same word that's used for acquiring an Israelite servant. Presumably, that's the Israelite is not a piece of furniture or something, and so we have really, it's more like contractual language that is taking place here. And we talk about, in sports, we talk about trading players and acquiring players and having team owners and so forth. You do have, for example, Eve talking about having acquired a man-child with the help of the Lord in
I feel like that's a very scholarly facepalm there, Josh.
Sorry, I just get so tired of hearing it. If anybody wants to hear the greatest reaction, who knows who that guy is? I think John Collins up at Yale gave the best reaction to that. Because I asked him the question, I don't even remember where, and he essentially said, "Nice try." Nice try. Yeah. So like, I don't know if I need to go into this sports contractual stuff. A sports contract pays the person millions of dollars. They can leave whenever they want. They're not slaves. I mean, this is why I learned about Venn diagrams just because of this. And I think they're Venn diagrams. The two circles that go together and overlap. Okay. So there are words in English and in every goddamn language that have semantic overlap, right? Like the word run as it applies to like a deer running across the field, and the word run as it applies to the engine in your car, right? There is some overlap in a Venn diagram, but you can't then say that they mean the same thing, right? They have this exact same nuance all the time. Like, that's not how this works. So when you define terms, like, sorry, go ahead.
So, sorry, I was just gonna say, I think that what you're trying to say is that there's an equivocation fallacy going on.
Yes.
Here.
Yes. Yeah. Lexicographically, right? When you study, like when committees get together and they say, hey, all right, how should we be translating eved, right? The Hebrew word that is translated slave. What drives the meaning? Well, you don't like say, well, over here in this other verse in Isaiah 53, it means, it's used to talk about like the suffering servant. Well, that's like Jesus. And so Jesus is King of Kings. So then Eved means king. Like, no, right? That's not how that works. And not that I think anybody's actually making that argument. Certainly, I don't think Paul would make that argument. But the way that you define a term and figure out what it means is the fucking context. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say it like that, but that's what it is. It's the context, right? So you don't say, well, I mean, shit, here, Cain is acquired of the Lord. Well, that must be what it says. He acquired a belt for silver, right? What? No, Eve didn't like give silver to Yahweh to get Cain. Like, I mean, okay. No. So yes, you can't just say there's a one-to-one correspondence because a word means something here, it means something here. It's not how it works. So certainly, and I do this in the book, I go through this argument in Did the Old Testament Endorse Slavery? And I show all the different places where the word kana, which is the Hebrew word that's used here, refers to, it just means to buy something. You buy a pot, you buy a belt, you buy a slave. And what you do to figure out what these people are, what their social position is, what their activities are, is you look at the goddamn context. And when it talks about they become property, they are not released, they're passed down as inheritance, they serve for life. Like, okay.
Yeah, I don't know why Paul Copan just sort of looks past that, because, well, talking about how you can bequeath them as property and all this other stuff and everything. I just don't understand how he can sort of just jump over that part and act like, because I feel like he's acted with his comparison to like trading football players or whatnot.
Yes.
Is that he's acting like, he's already come to the conclusion that chattel slavery doesn't exist. So what is it talking about? It's talking about debt slaves. And so apparently you can trade debt slaves as like they're football players or something like that. Like, oh, that guy right there, he loves to take on debts and then not pay them. I'll trade him off for that guy that can do the same thing.
It's like I feel like it's like making an argument for how great the prison system is, because some homeless people during the winter in really cold areas of the country will commit like a minor crime or something. I don't, like something that gets them 6 months in jail, 5 months in jail, so that they can get out of the cold, right? Or like how jail must be great because there are people that try to get in. Like, what? Okay, I don't even remember what his earlier point was. Because the word is used both for Israelites and yes, that's the point. The point of the text is that an Israelite, go back to Exodus 21, read what's going on there. An Israelite is destitute. What does he have left? He has himself. He sells himself. If you read, 2 Kings 4, you see a creditor coming to take the 2 children of the widow woman. It's not that they're like, woohoo, you get to go be slaves. No, come on. Like, Jesus. So yes, they're selling themselves or they're being purchased. Sometimes, like if you look at Newsy, for example, doesn't matter. There's a Mesopotamian city, Newsy, and people will come in and say, like, if I'm really, really poor and you're really, really wealthy, John, I might come to you and say, hey, I will be your slave for the rest of your life. And we'll sign this contract. I'll be your slave, sell myself to you, right? We'll sign this contract. We'll negotiate the terms, and I become your slave. Your literal slave. I can't leave. If I leave, there are hefty, hefty penalties that are put on me. People can go read about them if they want to. But the reason that I would do that is that at the end, when you die, that contract, it's a process of adopting me. You adopt me legally, and I become your child. I get manumitted upon your death, and I get a share in your inheritance. That's why I would do it, right? So those are things that can happen, but that's not what they're talking about here. These are people. It says it. The text is explicit. Like,
just so you know, Casey just offered to adopt you.
Listen, you don't want me as a kid. All this profanity I use, it's no good. It's no good. Sorry.
Have you seen my channel? The shirt that I have on right now says citation fucking needed. I felt like it was appropriate for the stream.
Mine says,
y'all need Jesus. All right. Are you ready to continue?
With the video? Sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine.
Genesis 4, or in the book of Ruth, Boaz acquires Ruth as a wife in this legal transaction.
It's not the flex that he thinks it is, but go ahead.
It's definitely not the flex he thinks it is.
Too, and I point this out in the forthcoming book, that within a generation, at max 2, you would have these foreigners who are assimilated into the nations in which they live. So basically, it's not going to be an intergenerational sort of servitude, as James Hoffmeyer and others have pointed out. That this is something that actually, any bequeathing or passing them on from one generation to another, just basically doesn't take place. You have
this.
I'm sorry. Hold on. I've got to wait a second. This seems very contrary. I just need to double check something real fucking quick right here. Let me see if I can read this real quick. You may bequeath them to your sons after you inherit as a possession forever.
Yes.
So Josh, apparently this just didn't happen and they wrote it down for shits and giggles.
See, but this is what is so goddamn frustrating about this type of apologetic. Let's take a step away for a second from this and let's go back to ancient Near Eastern law codes, right? People have, it's become cool among Christian apologists now to say, whoa, we know. Don't you know, you silly atheists? Don't you know that the ancient Near Eastern law codes? Do you even know what those are, bro? The ancient Near Eastern law codes, they weren't normative legislation. I mean, what a silly notion. These are propaganda pieces. It's not that these are the actual laws that were enforced. And so when you come to the biblical law collections, that it's not like Yahweh is actually saying, go do this stuff. This is where what you're doing is you have a foot in both camps. You have a foot in the fundamentalist evangelical interpretation of the text where you're like, Yahweh gave these commands to Moses, right? These are the commands that were given to Moses, to the nation of Israel after they left in the Exodus and Mount Sinai, bitches, right here, right? Then when that doesn't work, when it says really bad shit, you're like, wait. Scholars have determined, though, that this didn't actually happen. So you can't go using this, right? No, but Moses, Yahweh, but you can't go saying that these are actual laws. You can't have it both ways. You got to pick one, right? You can't have it both ways. So this idea here that, wait a minute, I mean, the text says this, but we know that this is late, right? This is a late exilic or post-exilic idea. In fact, we know this, like, duh, read Leviticus 25, read fucking Deuteronomy 15. This is utopian language, right? God is supernaturally providing. Of course it's utopian language, but that's a critical look at the text. And they don't do a critical look at the text unless it suits them. And then it's like, whoa, hyperbole, ancient Near Eastern war rhetoric. These aren't law codes. Like, miss me with that shit.
Yeah, here in a little bit, if we get to it, I'm not sure if we'll have time, but I know that at some point, Praise, I believe, said that the laws that are commanded by God, that are given by God, at least the uncomfortable ones, they are descriptive, not prescriptive, and somehow that means that, like, the bad shit just never happened.
And that's what this is, right? And again,
Yeah.
like I'm upset with the argument, right? Because I understand why people are doing it. I really do. It's one of these things that if you haven't been put through the rigor to actually have to think about these things from a lexicographic standpoint, or from a historical standpoint, if you haven't undergone that, you just may not know that, right? And so what I'm saying is that this is something that's they need to come up with something. They need to come up with something. And so this is one of the, wait a minute, if these aren't normative legislation, then maybe we can use that. Maybe that's not an actual law. Like, that's not, you can't say that because it didn't happen in reality, that's not what the text means. It doesn't work that way, right? These are obviously Judean scribes, right? Writing this shit. Or the priestly, so whatever source that you're talking about when we're talking about the Pentateuch. These are writers that are writing in utopian language here, right? This is part of the Holiness Code, and but I don't think I'm very certain that Praise would not say the documentary hypothesis or any type of, well, I don't know, maybe he would. I don't want to speak for him, but I don't think that Copan is going to walk away from at least a significant core of the Pentateuch being Mosaic authorship. You can't do both. You can't do both. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I guess one thing that I'm left wondering is, do we actually have evidence that this was not practiced in Israel? Like, I mean, it kind of felt like, because he's just sort of saying it as if, I'm the authority on this, and so I don't need source evidence or anything like that. You just got to believe me, bro. Is kind of the vibe that I get off of Copan right now. But I'm just kind of curious, if there is any kind of evidence that says, yeah, they didn't really do this. It was just sort of written down.
So I haven't done tons of research, and I'm not exactly sure where he's talking about, Hoffmeyer talking about this. He did a video panel a year ago, maybe. I don't remember. Dick Averbeck was in there. It's people from Trinity. And I think Peter Williams is in there, who's up at Tyndale. Evangelicals, right? And they're talking about slavery. And I know that he talked about how in Egypt, historically speaking, probably talking about the New Kingdom, I don't remember, but that this was something that when Israelites, or not when Israelites, I don't remember exactly what he was talking about, when slaves, probably just Asiatic slaves or Semitic slaves, came into Egypt, that within a generation or two, they were assimilated into the people, right? Let me take a step back. So that's not Israel, right? If that's what he's referring to, he's not talking about Israel there. But let me take a step back. Who gives a fuck? Let's just assume for a second that that's true, that the guy's only a slave for his entire life. But by the next generation, or maybe the one after that, they're not slaves anymore. I mean, is that what you want to do? Like, hey, check it out. Look what I came up with. Like, no. Walk back. I mean, Jesus. Yeah.
All right. We got a couple more minutes in this section, so let's see if he has any.
Sorry.
I mean, he has bad takes all throughout it, and so let's see how much longer he can go before another bad take occurs.
Have them assimilated within the nation and within a generation or max two. Finally, I would also add that the foreigner, we're told in Leviticus 19 that the Israelites are to love the alien or the foreigner in their midst. Do you think that, say 6 chapters later, all of a sudden you're saying, oh, it's okay to abuse the foreigner in your midst?
Oh my God.
That's not it at all.
Pause it. The biblical text talk a lot about loving your children. Do you think that in Proverbs it would then say to beat them with wooden rods? I mean, come on. Do you think the text would actually say if you love your child, you will beat them, and the father that doesn't love them, that hates him, will not beat him? That's abuse from our, like, this is they talk about this all the time, looking back with like 21st century eyes and not understanding the context. That's what that is. They did not consider it abuse. God, this was part of what they did.
Yeah, that brings up I mean, as you were talking, I thought of like, trying to put it into the correct context. Like, would the Israelites consider buying a stranger that or sojourner in the land, a foreigner in the land, buying them after they defaulted off of a loan or something like that? Like, would they see that as an unloving action, or I don't think that maybe they would see it as maybe necessarily a good action. I could see them seeing it as like a neutral, like this is the law, like this is what happens, kind of thing.
I mean, gee, think about it. Look back to Exodus 21, right? Or look at Deuteronomy 15. They're able to take Israelites as eveds. This is the argument that they make. Right? Isn't this the argument that they make all the time? Oh, man, look, it says if they love their master, then they can volunteer to stay with them forever. Isn't that their argument? That it's so good, that it's so great? Why isn't it so great now?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, and he actually brings that up later. The whole, the slaves opting or servants or something opting to become part of the master's household or something like that. I don't know. He brings it up later. But we do get a quick super chat that says Mount Sinai bitches deserves money.
I'm sorry.
I will PayPal you $2 there, Josh, because I agree.
So sorry. Oh my God. I had a beer like an hour ago. That's what it is, I guess.
Oh yeah, it's all in the beer.
Oh God. But
Right.
just to sort of finalize that, like, if we're going to play this game, then we have to go to places like Deuteronomy 21 and say, well, they weren't forcing captive women to marry them. They weren't doing that because they're supposed to love the foreigner, right? So how could they, you couldn't force somebody. Why not say that? I mean, Mike Winger's going to say, man, it was great. It's a great, we should do it today. Right. I don't know if he would say that. I don't know if that's fair, but yeah, anyway.
Well, I mean, Paul Copan does make an argument for Numbers 31 here. That's one that I definitely want to get to.
Yeah, we can skip if you think there are better arguments or things. That
well, I don't know. I mean, he's saying a lot of dumb shit here, so I'm good with continuing with this section for right now.
Requirement. In fact, we see mentioned 36 times in the Pentateuch. To love the stranger, the alien, the widow, because you too were once aliens in the land of Egypt. Yes. There's that reminder over and over again. So if you just think about it, if the Israelites had been oppressed in the land of Egypt, are they then going to go, therefore say, oh, we've got permission to oppress foreigners? I mean, it's just ludicrous as you think about it.
No, what's ludicrous is that you're equivocating on the meaning of the word oppress. Like that you're saying that they would have thought that taking someone as a chattel slave was oppression. You can't do that. You can't, like, look, somebody like Gerstenberger has a, in the Old Testament, I think it's in the Old Testament library. I can't remember. He's got a commentary on the book of Leviticus. And he wrestles with this, right? I think Gerstenberger's an evangelical, but he wrestles with this in the text, right? He says, how is it that Leviticus 19:33-34 could say, you know, love the foreigner, but then here in Leviticus 25:44-46 says you can keep him for life, but it does. And to me, it's frustrating that we would say today that beating your child with a wooden rod as a form of discipline is oppression. I mean, I hope that we would say that.
Well, as long as you're not Michael Pearl.
Should I know who that is? Sorry.
Oh, no, so sorry. That's the guy, along with his wife, that wrote the book To Train Up a Child.
Oh my God, yes.
Yeah, he teaches how you can beat your child into submission and not cause any kind of like alarms at school and everything like that, and have CPS called on you and stuff.
Jeez.
It's basically a how to abuse your kids kind of
God.
Book. Anyways, I'm sorry for interrupting you.
No. I think I probably made my point too.
Well, I mean, to play off of that, I mean, it was not considered bad or abusive not too long ago for school administrators to beat kids with paddles.
I got beaten.
I mean, yeah, well, I mean, I was in a school where a kid bit me on the arm, and I saw him later on in the day getting the shit beat out of him by the principal.
Yep.
So, I mean, it was not too long ago, which, I mean, I'm an old fuck, but it was not too long ago that, that kids were being beaten in schools. And there are people now that want to sign a waiver that would allow teachers to beat kids in school. Yeah. So, I mean, no, I think the whole, whipping your kids with, hard instruments and everything like that, I think that, that now some people wouldn't consider as abusive. So, I mean, yeah. Totally. So there was about another minute here, but I mean, he's going to be saying, the same kind of stupid shit. I do have another, I've got several sections, but here's one that I want to go to next that deals with a little bit different of a topic. And I think we'll probably have to stop it kind of quick because, that's how it's been going. It's fun that way. KC says it's fun this way.
Sorry.
She loves hearing Dr. Josh say stuff like Mount Sinai, bitches.
Something's wrong with me.
Antebellum South, they think of slavery in the modern sense, and it's much, when you think of ancient Israel, it is a much more affirming and not injurious to the person. It affirms the dignity of the servant. If a servant is struck so that he dies, well, the person who struck him is to be put to death. So those are the sorts of things. There's humanity that
Can
is
you
being
pause
affirmed here.
Yes, I definitely can. What are your thoughts, Dr. Josh?
I have my. So my eyes are pretty awful, so I'm sorry. I'm going to try to read something, though, because I'm sure I can find it pretty quickly. This is from Volume 1, the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. Okay. Damn it. So I have a section in here about were the laws in the Old Testament about slavery distinct from or more similar to whatever the laws in the Antebellum South. Not the practice in the antebellum South, not what we see in the movies, but the laws, right? Which I think makes it scarier. So I say here, yes. For example, this is after the Revolutionary War. In Georgia's Constitution in 1798, so think about where we are, 1798, any person who shall maliciously dismember or deprive a slave of life, what do you think the penalty is?
I don't know. If I go by Copan, it's death, but in reality, probably not all that harsh. Maybe I don't know.
So this is a law in the antebellum South, right? In Georgia, or leading up to post-revolutionary. They actually get more humanitarian as you go forward in time. Any person who shall maliciously dismember or deprive a slave of life shall suffer such punishment as would be inflicted in case the like offense had been committed on a free white person. And on the like proof, except in case of insurrection by such slave, and unless such death should happen by accident, in giving such slave moderate correction. Where else do we hear that?
Well, yeah, that would be, I mean, it's in the Old Testament. I can't think of
That's Exodus 21, 20 to 21. Like almost verbatim could be a commentary on that.
Yeah.
Right? So if a master dismembers or deprives a slave of life shall suffer such punishment as would be inflicted in the case like offense have been committed on a free white person, death, right? And on like ground except, so when would that not be the case? Insurrection by the slave. And unless such death should happen by accident in giving such slave moderate correction. So if a man beats his male or female slave with a wooden rod and they die immediately, then he is to be punished, which probably means killed. But if he survives a day or two, which is moderate correction, then he's not to be punished because he is his money.
Right. So now does so like if for instance, like either in the I guess it would be the same in Antebellum South and in Israel as far as the law is concerned. Like let's say a master goes up and just kills a slave.
Yep.
Then the punishment for that would be death.
Yes. Probably. There's a little bit of debate about what the Hebrew word in verse 20 means. It's this Hebrew word nakam. It means to avenge. Every other time, or at least almost every other time, it means like to kill the person. But the problem is that there's a phrase that's used all throughout Exodus 21 to talk about somebody getting the death penalty that's not that. But I think that it is. And I think most scholars would probably say that it is death.
Okay.
And
I mean, the biggest takeaway I'm taking from this section right here is that he's trying to differentiate Israelite slavery from Antebellum South slavery, but in pure like analysis of like the laws of both systems, they are the same.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm not a legal specialist, so I would never claim that I could say that I've looked at all the laws, but Thomas Morris is a legal specialist from the Antebellum South and earlier periods in American history. So people can go read his book. I can't remember the title. It's written in the 90s, I think. But I think it's like Slave Laws in the South, something like that. Actually, if Ahmad wants to drop the link, that would make me feel a lot better. Sorry, I don't mean to like boss your mods around.
No,
drop
you're
a link.
fine.
But that's the problem, right? That people, this is, and apologists get on atheists all the time for doing this, right? Like they'll go to an atheist to go to the book of Judges and say, like, look at this horrible thing that this judge did. And what does the apologist say? Well, that's what fallen man did. You can't look at what the people are doing. You have to look at what God's law says, right? But they don't do that when it comes to slavery. They go to the laws in the Hebrew Bible, and then they go to what was practiced in the Antebellum South. And it's dangerous. I know I've said this before, probably on this show, but it's worth saying it again. If we forget the past, we're doomed to repeat it, right? So I swear, so many of these apologetic arguments for slavery in the Hebrew Bible could be made for the laws in the Antebellum South. Let that sink in. And nobody would do that. My God, who would do that? I mean, I guess there are some people, but yes, Thomas Morris.
Morse.
M-O-R-R-I-S. No, Casey's got it. M-O-R-R-I-S.
Yeah, I believe Casey's getting the link to it. But I mean, I'm glad that I've got a correct understanding of how wrong Copan is here, because when I initially heard this, I was like, wait, were masters killed if they killed the slaves? Just wantonly killed them? Not wantonly killed them, but wantonly killed them. I remember thinking, like, is that true or not? Because I feel like anything that Copan says, I can't really exactly trust.
But this
just
is
because he's already said so much wrong.
John, this is the problem. You also get this in the laws of Hammurabi.
Yeah.
Right? If someone takes it's called a niputum. It's a little different. It's a debt slave, but it's a certain types of distrainee. So it's slightly different, but it's a debt slave. If you take a debt slave and you beat him to death, it's lex talionis, right? So, like, if it's the law says if he dies of natural causes, there's no punishment, which is essentially what Exodus 20-21 is doing. But if he dies from the result of a beating, if it's the son of a free man that's been beaten to death, that was the niputum, the debt slave, then the son of the master will die. Right? It's the law of retribution. Anyway, it's just the idea that the laws in the Hebrew Bible are so different and so progressive, and just in so many cases just not true. And in many of the cases that people will cite, it's in these utopian sections, right? Mm-hmm. Where God's going to supernaturally provide. Anyway, I'm going to shut up.
No, please don't. You're the expert here, not me. But that's one part that I was really wanting to emphasize here, as far as the section goes, because I feel like a lot of times the slavery apologists, like praise, will do is they'll try to make it out to be like Israelite slavery was so much more humane than like other versions of ancient Near Eastern slavery. Like the slavery in Israel, what was better because it wasn't chattel slavery or whatever. So that means that, it was more humane. But the problem is, and from what I remember about, your books, is that the comparing Israelite slave laws to other ancient Near Eastern slave laws is that it was pretty much the same thing, with the exception of, like, I know that there's a few cases where the Israelite laws are a little bit harsher than other ancient Near Eastern.
Yeah, like in the laws of Hammurabi, you're allowed to keep a dead slave for 3 years, then they get released in the 4th.
Right.
In the Hebrew Bible, they're kept for 6 years, released in the 7th. Right. Mm-hmm. So, we would say in that case, I mean, if you would reverse that, right, and say Hammurabi, you keep him for 6, man, and the Bible, you keep him for 3, boy, they'd be all over that. You'd hear that all the time, right? Oh, look, he cuts the time in half. Yeah, God is just, of course, we're not going to talk about that. I'm not going to talk about that one. But yeah, I mean, they're on. It's like, the Hebrew Bible is a product of its time. That's that's what we need to remember. It's a product of its time. And the chapter in volume 2 that I do on rape and adultery laws, there's just not a lot of difference between what you see in the Hebrew Bible, in the legal sections of the Hebrew Bible on rape and adultery, and what you see in the rest of the ancient Near East. Sometimes a little better, sometimes it's like it's just on par.
Right.
Which is what we would
exactly.
expect.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I would have expected at least.
Yeah.
So okay, we're going to continue with where we're at now, but it's a kind of a different topic that's going to be talked about here, and I can't wait to see what your reaction is.
And we have, if you look at a couple of passages, I think David Klein's noted Old Testament scholar points out that if you look at, say, Deuteronomy 23, which again mentions a foreign runaway slave who comes to Israel, he is allowed to settle in any of Israel's cities. So he's running away, presumably from an oppressive master, and is able to settle within Israel rather than, as countries typically did, they had extradition treaties to send runaway slaves back to their masters. And if you harbored a runaway slave, you are liable to the death penalty. But here, the nation of Israel is told, let these foreign runaway slaves settle in any of Israel's cities, and the implication being to care for the foreigner rather than to oppress the foreigner further. And so there's a free choice in there, the freedom to run away and not be subject to harsh oppression in those nations. And you also have in David Klein's.
Sorry, did you want to say something?
There are very few times that I want to say to somebody, can you put that in a syllogism for me?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, this is the only time that I can think that I've wanted to do that. But that last jump that he did there, right? You have foreigners that can escape. I'm with you. That's what it is. Everybody thinks that Deuteronomy 23, 15 to 16 is about any slave in Israel can just run away from any master, and that's it. Everything's done. So he's right? I'm glad that he knows that this is about foreigners coming in Israel. Read through the book of Deuteronomy. They're not supposed to have extradition treaties because those countries, Deuteronomy 20, those countries that are in cities that are outside, they're vassals. That's what the text is calling for. Kill everybody in Canaan. All the other cities around you are vassals. So you wouldn't have extradition treaties with them. Anybody. They're not supposed to, is the point. Anyway, I'm not like a, what would I be to have to like an international diplomacy or international law specialist? I'm just not. Anyway, the point is, but so I'm glad that he knows that. I'm glad that he's saying that. But then to say did I hear him that, and maybe we should play it again just so that I don't, but I feel like I heard him well.
Here, let's, I can definitely rewind.
Just go back 5 seconds. I think it'll get it.
And so there's a free choice in there, the freedom to run away and not be subject to harsh oppression.
Of course, of the foreign slave, of the foreigner from another nation coming to Israel. He needs to go read. I think Sam Gringus wrote on this, but nobody should quote me on that. I don't remember. Samuel Gringus has a 2012, I think, volume on slavery or on the laws. And he's got a big section on slavery. But the point here, at least one of the major points, is that this is like, the point is not, the point is to make sure that you're not somebody that's harboring a slave. That's what the argument is here. You don't, notice that you don't take them into your house and care for them. The text, if you read it, it says you do this. No touchy.
No touchy.
Where's that from? That's from
Arrested Development?
Arrested Development. Yeah, in the jail. No touching, no touching. But I feel like we just got a lot closer, John, just through that, the Arrested Development thing. But going from making this leap, like premise 1, premise 2, right? Foreigners can escape, no extradition treaties, therefore any slave can run away. as your conclusion? What?
Yeah.
No, he's very specific. And then it seems like he just opens it up to any slave in Israel can run away. And that's it. If he gets away, he's good to go. Like, I don't understand. Maybe that's not what he meant, you know?
Well, I don't know if it's what Paul Copan meant, but I have heard multiple people make the argument that slaves were freely able to leave oppressive masters like whenever they wanted to, and the Israelites were to not return them to their masters, that they were to keep them and everything like that. And of course, they cite the section that is about no extradition to other countries, kind of thing. But so I mean, I have heard that, and I definitely thought that Paul Copan was sitting there like, oh yeah, foreign slaves, they come in, they're fleeing oppressive masters, the Israelites aren't supposed to give them back.
I was excited.
So all slaves could have this free choice of just leaving their master. And I'm just sitting there like, who the fuck? What the fuck is he reading?
I have to point out, Heathen Queen correctly has said it's also from the Emperor's New Groove. And I think actually that's where I was remembering it from. No touchy, no touchy. No touch.
Really? See, with that, I always think of the dad in the jail cell, and he gets mad, I think at one of his sons or somebody, and like the guards are like, no touching. He's like, no touching.
Yeah. Definitely. But I think that's Cusco, the Emperor in the Emperor's New Groove. He's like, no touchy, no touch.
Right.
Yeah. So I stand corrected. But yeah, so I don't think we have to go into the argument for why it's not, specifically why it can't be an Israelite that's anticipated in the text. Because if you look at Deuteronomy 23:15-16, it says they can settle wherever they want in whatever city, right? Well, that doesn't make any sense because they would go back to their land.
Right.
They had land. They wouldn't settle wherever. They'd go back to their land. Anyway, and that people can read Raymond Westbrook on that, or Samuel Gringus, really anybody.
All right. He's got a little bit more that he says on this particular topic, so maybe he'll clear it up a little bit. Let's hope that he clears up his point.
And you also have David Kleins mentions that you have in chapter 21 of Exodus that there's a servant who says, I love my master, my employer, the person with whom I'm contracted. And that person can choose to live with that person permanently. And so you can, and this is, of course, the ideal situation. And basically, if you can choose by your own free will to be a servant, or you could choose to run away from a bad situation, David Klein says this fundamentally deconstructs slavery or servitude as an institution. You can actually, you're not being held against your will. You can actually leave this negative situation and not
I would love to see. Sorry, I would love to see where David Kleins writes that. And now I'm going to have to go look, because he's got a really great 3-volume commentary on Job. And he may talk about it there, because in Job 31, right, Job talks about how he's, he doesn't oppress, he doesn't withhold justice from his slaves. But I think he actually makes the argument there that that's sort of rhetoric. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But I mean, that's just not the case. Right. And if David Kleins does say that, I'm disappointed.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, this whole assertion because I thought that he might clarify, that he was only talking about foreign slaves, but he seems to seamlessly transition into talking about just all slaves, because I know that you were nodding in agreement with the whole idea of choosing to become part of a master's household and all this other stuff because they love the master and everything like that. Now, is that talking about like all forms of slaves, or is it like debt slaves? Or
it's Israelites that they're talking about, right?
Okay.
So this is far more nuanced, I think, than he's laying this out to be, which is frustrating. So in Exodus 21, 2-6, you have the male debt slave, the male Israelite debt slave that's being described. Like, what happens? Then in verses 7-11, it's the female slave, the Amah. Okay, so in 2 through 6, he says, as you know very well, if he's sells himself as a slave or he's purchased as a slave, served for 6 years, released in the 7th. If he comes in with a wife, goes out with a wife. Comes in single, goes out single. If he comes in single, and the by the way, it's scary now to hear apologists talk about this. Scary. Because they realize what they're saying or what the text says, and they're just biting the bullet now, and it's frightening. If he comes in single, the master gives him a wife, ostensibly a slave. When his term of service is up, he has to make a choice. He can go out free, because that's how he came in, and the wife and any children are the master's because they're his property. So he can go out without his wife and kids, or he can say, I love my wife and kids, love my master, I'm going to stay, and he becomes a chattel slave. The Israelite becomes a chattel slave, just so everybody heard me say that. Because that's what a chattel slave is. Doesn't mean that they're furniture. If one more person says that to me, so that's what Exodus 21 is doing. It's not like yeah. So then Deuteronomy 15 is sort of working off of Exodus 21, the covenant code, and making it more utopian. Think about some of the differences. Exodus 21 says 6 years, goes out in the 7th, no debt, right? He's free and clear. Well, Deuteronomy 15 is like, well, I mean, that's good and all, but now you got to give him a whole bunch of monetaries. You got to give him like from your wine press and from your grain, and like you got to give him provisions when he goes out so that he doesn't fall back into debt servitude. So it's like reworking and again making slightly much more utopian the concepts that you see in the covenant code. One of them here is it doesn't talk about like I haven't read Deuteronomy 15 in a while, but it's like it focuses in on I love my master. So yeah, but I mean, like I don't understand his point. I mean, if his point is, sorry, go ahead. Maybe you can tell me what you think his point is.
Well, yeah. So the general vibe that I get from this section is that they're trying to really sweeten up like slavery as it's practiced in Israel through what we know in the Old Testament. And it seems like what he's saying is that slavery was not abusive or oppressive or anything like that. In fact, slaves often chose to become part of the master's households because they loved the master so much. Like they were so pleased with being the master's, slave or servant that they were like, please, can I become part of your family? And so they willingly made the free choice to become part of the family, be adopted into the family. So to me, it sounds like they're trying to really sweeten up what Israelite or slavery in Israel was like, and that's that it was like a vacation,
and they're not adopted, right? Like that's they're a slave. Like I don't. This is so weird to me. Like this is why I say apologists now. I heard one recently, like come out very clearly about this. Well, of course, the wife and children don't go out with the man. The master gave them to him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like, is this thing on? Like, do you know what? Can you hear yourself? I play that back for him. Like, is that really what you wanted to say? Because that should be the point where you go, hold on a second. That sounds pretty bad. But anyway, I don't know. It's just scary to me.
Yeah, no, it's totally scary to me too, and I think it's really gross how they are trying to make slavery look better than it actually is in Israel, and they have to pull this equivocation game and everything like that. Yeah. Now, Joe, I didn't ask you beforehand, but would you be good for like another 30 minutes? Or
yeah, sure.
Do you?
Yeah,
okay.
I'm good.
I didn't
This
know
is
because
important.
there's okay. Yeah.
I was going to say, like, and I messaged you earlier about it, and I'm totally down to do this at another time. But I know we always like say things like when we do the line or we do these other things like, come on, theists, come give us your best questions or something. But I think there's a place to say we don't want theists calling in, atheists and skeptics that hear arguments like this and say, I don't have like the biblical know-how or whatever. I do philosophy or whatever. I'd really like to know. I'm sure that this is a bullshit argument, but I'd really like to know why. It would be cool to have those calls come in because I think those are really important things to deal with. Anyway, just throw that out there.
Yeah, I was gonna see if I could negotiate something with Jimmy using the Line's resources to try to host that
cool.
for a line one night.
Yeah,
because
cool.
I think because I know that they're all set up to do that. I have no idea how to do all of the mixing that would be required for that. So I'll see if I can. I'll see if I can do some trading around with Jimmy, see if he'll let me do that. So this next section that we're going to take a look at here is one that really caught me off guard, because it just seems it's just straight up. It seems like he's lying.
I'm so sorry. Can I? Sorry, I just straight up interrupted you. But Heathen Queen put something in the side chat.
Yeah.
Can you highlight it? It was put up at 9:24. Starts with the word coupon, which I think is clever.
Let's see. Hold on.
This is so. I can just read it if need be.
Oh, wait. Here you go.
Yep.
Got it. Heathen Queen. Coupon can never imagine a scenario in which he would ever be oppressed so that he can rationalize all kinds of oppression and violence.
This is why, right? This is why when I see a panel of men talking about abortion, my blood pressure goes up. This is why when I see a bunch of white people sitting around talking about racism, my blood pressure goes up. And it's not because men can't have opinions about abortion or that white people can't have opinions about racism, but they don't know what it's like, right? If you can't be in that position, my God, you need to be asking the people that can and are. And so here, I mean, again, I like Paul, but Paul's he's an old white guy, right? I mean, like he has, just like I have no concept of what it really means to be oppressed. So for me to sit here and try to rationalize it's not so bad to be a slave. My God, this is why I really love Jennifer Glancy. Jennifer Glancy, a New Testament scholar, early Christianity scholar, wrote on slavery in the New Testament, early Christianity. And I emailed her and I said, would you please come on the channel and talk about this? And she said, there's someone you need to get more. His name is Ronald Charles. He also writes on this. He's an African-American that wrote on slavery in the New Testament. You need to get him on to talk about it. And I really respected that because it's being sensitive to this issue. You don't get he can't imagine it, so he's able to rationalize it. And that is so true. I just think that was a really important point to make. Thank you, Heathen Queen.
Yeah, thank you so much. I so appreciate all of the great comments that get put into the live chat, everything like that. Which do you happen to remember when G-Man said that he'd be my slave?
Oh,
and that was like really uncomfortable.
I mean, uncomfortable is like, that's a nice way of putting it. Oh my God, I actually watched that debate recently.
Oh, really?
Because you talked about it at the Better Conference, and I was like, oh my God, that was so awful. AWK WARD. Okay, anyway.
All right, so this section right here caught me off guard because, like I said, it seems to me like Paul Copan is lying about this. maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just he's got a weird interpretation of stuff, but it just kind of seems like he's lying about something. So maybe you can enlighten me a little bit.
Okay.
And legislative.
Yeah, that's something that I go into in this forthcoming book, is about a vindictive bully. That when you look at these laws, and there's a general understanding that primarily these are expressions of wisdom. I'd say it's not only that there are examples of what wise living looks like, but it is also there is a normative force to these laws. There's a kind of moral impulse that exists there, and of course there are you do have certain punishments, for example, and I go into detail on this, that punishments are primarily like stoning and burning and so forth. Not that these were actually carried out in Israel. We do have two examples of capital punishment, where for blasphemy and Sabbath breaking. But apart from that, these laws, and is widely understood in the ancient Near East, to have kind of a scare effect, that when you mention hear burning or stoning or whatever, it's to actually alert people to the fact that this is bad, do not do this, avoid this, etc.
So I mean, I don't know if you can understand why I think that he might be lying to us, because I mean, as I understand it, these are laws that are given to him by God, right? These are laws that God says that these are the punishment for these things and everything. Like, it doesn't strike me when because we've read the Old Testament, it never struck me that it's like, oh, this is a scare tactic. Ha! If you do this, I'll stone the fuck out of you. Like, it doesn't really have that kind of vibe in the Bible.
So the way that I would explain this, and we talked about it a little bit earlier, but maybe an analogy would be good here. If I went to Comic-Con, is that a thing? I think that's a thing.
Well, it's Comic-Con, but yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
And like we could find some, that movie with oh my God, I can't think of anybody's name now. That it's like a Star Trek parody where it actually becomes real.
Galaxy Quest?
Galaxy Quest, thank you. Like the kids that help them out, end up helping them out. Like they were believing that Galaxy Quest, the show, was real, right? So if you were to talk to them about the inner workings of the ship, right? They had that question, right? When they came up to the panel and they were like, in episode 18, you talked about how the quasar effect. And, obviously, if we think back to episode 7, and because they're operating in this fundamentalist approach to the show, it's real and it happened. All these episodes happened the way they happened. For someone to challenge them and say, wait a minute, look, you got a character here in episode 3 that died. And then what in episode 7, he's back. This is a contradiction, right? This thing can't be real. And they were to say, well, everybody knows that this is just a television show.
Mm-hmm.
You would look at them and say, well, wait, like, so you don't think that it's real? No, it's real. No, it's real. Yeah. The ship's out there flying around. We know it. Yeah, but you just said that everybody, we definitely know it's a show, and that's why you can see these types of continuity problems. It's like, wait, which one, right? So if you're going to be a more progressive Christian, right, and you're going to say things like there's a lot of mythology back here, and the Exodus story is, maybe it's cultural memory, and maybe there's a kernel of truth, but really these are Canaanites, in the Iron Age. Like, okay, but you're not a fundamentalist evangelical anymore. You're not thinking that Moses got these tablets from on high from Yahweh right at the mountain. You can't do both. So when he says, "Oh, well, we know that scholars say these ancient Near Eastern law collections are more like wisdom, so it's not like these are really lost." Well, then you don't think Yahweh handed them down. And cool, like if that's where he is, man, I'm super excited. Let's move on, right? But I don't think that's where he is. But so I think that there's just this foot in both camps, right? Playing both sides. And I'm not saying that he knows that he's doing that. I don't know. And I understand why you think he might be. I don't know. Because that's the case. Look, let me do one more. If you were to go read through Neo-Babylonian royal inscriptions or Neo-Assyrian royal inscriptions, and you read it as a fundamentalist, right? Everything that Sennacherib writes in his royal inscriptions is like literally true, right? When it says that he slaughtered the city of Hiramu, you wouldn't then say, well, wait a minute, we know that this is royal propaganda, right? He didn't actually do a lot of this stuff that he says he did. Like, he didn't carry his own chariot or whatever. And that might have been Sargon, I can't remember. But the point is, it's been a while since I've read Neo-Assyrian royal inscriptions. But the point is, if you're going to have one interpretive framework, you got to stick with it, right? And if you're not going to stick with it, I'm super excited because now you're coming to the, the normal where everybody else is. But this is why people like Hofmeyr, when they argue for or against like a 15th century, a traditional Exodus date, like I'm pumped. Like, I obviously disagree with Hofmeyr, but I'm like, my beef is not with him usually, right? Because that's all very nuanced, but like, generally speaking, the people I'm arguing with are fundamentalists. Why? Because they take the Bible to be like in no nuanced fashion. It's like God created in 6 days, 6,000 years ago, right? These are the people. Yeah. So these are the people that I generally am interacting and engaging with. So if you take archaeology and you take, you do something like Lawson Younger does, and you say, hey, this is hyperbolic, ancient Near Eastern war rhetoric, and then he tries to parse out what historically could be viable, or whatever about Joshua or Judges, I still might disagree with him on his conclusion, but the methodology is getting like it's better for me. It's moving in the right direction, because he's walking away. He's walked away from a fundamentalist approach. You just can't do both. All right, I'm going to be quiet now. Sorry.
Well, I'm just thinking back to what Copan has said in this video so far. He was very adamant about the laws, the harshness of the laws when it comes to, killing a slave. That the punishment for that was death, right? Like, he was pretty, he seemed pretty adamant to me that, like, look, masters just couldn't beat the slave because they would be put to death if the slave died, But now he's saying that all of this, like all of these harsh punishments, like stoning, setting on fire, and all this other stuff, now all of a sudden, when it's inconvenient for him,
that's a good point.
It seems to me like he's saying that, well, this was really just a scare tactic. So, it's either the master really didn't have any kind of real blowback from killing a slave because it was just a scare tactic. If it was just a scare tactic, it would crumble so quick, because if you didn't actually follow through with the punishment and put people to death for it, then everybody would know, oh, these punishments are bullshit. We shouldn't be, you're not going to get killed, if you do one thing or another, which we do have historical evidence of, the Jews, like, performing stonings for various things. Like the one that comes to mind right off the top of my head is this one Jesus that existed under King Jannaeus in the 1st century BCE. He committed a crime, but I know he was supposed to be a sorcerer, and he talked some shit about the Jews at the time or something like that. But the point is that he's reported to have been stoned by the Talmud. And, he was stoned to death. His disciples were stoned to death and everything like that. So it's very obvious that stonings were regularly carried out, at least for punishments in some regard. So it seems like Paul is trying to talk out of both sides of his mouth.
Yeah. So there's obviously, and maybe not obviously, but so I wrote in chapter 6 of my book, I wrote about rape and adultery laws. I mean, it's not going to get you much. Look, it's only to hear. Like, I don't. But I tell you what, I will take my shirt off if somebody gives you $100. I shouldn't say that. People leave. That's what it is. I don't want the numbers to go down. But like, there are Sumerian law collections, right, that talk about maximum. They talk about punishments, right? X happens, person gets killed. Okay. We then have court cases, like the actual cuneiform documents. This is one of the nice things about working in Mesopotamia. You have the actual court cases, the actual documents, right, in clay. And like there was an adultery case. Adultery was supposed to be, according to the law collections, punishable by death. She wasn't put to death, right? That doesn't mean that no one was ever put to death. It like scholars, and again, I'm not a legal specialist here. We should probably talk to Bruce Wells or Jay Caballero, but it does seem like there are maximum punishments. So I talk about that, about rape and adultery. There seem to be cases where it's like death, but the husband could decide, or the king could decide, right, not to do that. So it's not like this necessary punishment. It's like a maximal punishment. But I don't even remember where he was where was he trying to go with that? So people didn't get, because the laws weren't normative.
He's talking about Praise brought up the whole idea of all these laws, the slave laws and everything like that. It's talked about being put to death, being stoned, and all that. Just basically, they're trying to explain away the harsh punishments that are I guess enforced by the law, or at least written down in the law. Like this was supposed to be the punishment for that, but the harsh punishments were just scare tactics for it or something. But
is it just to say, because this is what I mean, like, is the point I really want the viewing audience to stay. That's the key. We want to keep them here. So like if the argument is, well, these aren't normative legislation. So when it says Yahweh says, tell the children of Israel X, that's not really Yahweh says, tell the children of Israel X. Like it doesn't mean that they actually had to do X. Like you're stepping out of the fundamentalist interpretation of the text and into a critical understanding of the text, or at least a much more progressive view of the text.
Mm-hmm.
You can't do that. I mean, you can't do that and then jump back. It just doesn't work that way.
Right. We do have a little bit more to do in this section here, although we do have a few super chats to get caught up on, which I want to get to real quick. Jason Kolosik says, will those same people sign a waiver to be beaten?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. G-Man would, I guess.
God, but is that in reference to that in the school, kids getting beaten, sign the waiver for their kids to be beaten?
Yes.
Yeah, that's just crazy. It's just crazy. Ugh.
And then Jason also asks, what if slavery starts 1 year before Jubilee?
Yeah. So this is this is part of the issue, right? Again, Leviticus 25, I think most critical scholars would argue that this is utopian language. And what I mean by that is that like the way that the writer thought or wanted it to be. Right? So if you read through the text, it says read Deuteronomy 15, another utopian text. Like if the slave leaves, you're supposed to give them liberally from your possessions. Give this debt slave who's leaving you all kinds of money and like provisions and things, so they don't fall back into debt slavery. Why? Like, how is that going to work? Because economically, that's likely problematic. And the response is, Yahweh will bless you. Well, what's going on in Leviticus 26? If you guys go read Leviticus 26, it's the supernatural blessings and curses that will come upon Israel if they obey or disobey the law. I mean, it's the whole point. So when you read 25 and it's like, don't think to yourself, well, wait, how are we going to let the land rest for an entire year every 7 years and not like work the ground and to get our crop? How are we going to do that? Yahweh's going to come in and give you you can see Kenneth Copeland saying this, right? He's going to go, blow away that COVID and then say, God will give you such a blessing. He'll give you a blessing and you'll eat till the third year. I command these. Okay. So anyway, the point is that it's a supernatural intervention that's bringing about the success of this, the way this is being laid out. Yeah. I don't actually know how I got there.
That's fine. Who's Your Buddy says blasphemy, or as I call it, the original hate speech, isn't free speech law.
It is interesting how often the crime that is being committed in the biblical text is worshiping another god.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main reason or at least when we were reading through the Old Testament, that seemed to be the main reason God got pissed at the Israelites, was that they were either worshiping other gods or they were allowing other religions to worship inside their particular land. Like God was just pissed off at worshiping of other gods. And then Limited Light says, why can't Heathen Queen super chat? But I mean, she did. So I guess maybe that prompted the shirtless stuff. Okay. So a little bit more here with this particular section. So let's we got one more that just came in from Heathen Queen. Josh, does Yahweh have an opinion on living, laughing, loving, and pegging men? Live, laugh, love, and peg.
Sorry, that was a very high-pitched laugh of mine. I didn't have air. Had to get it back in.
I mean, isn't pegging what God did to Jacob in the desert? Your name's Israel now.
I don't know if that's canonical. Oh my God. I have no idea how to answer that. And if you're at work and you don't know what pegging is, not safe for work. Like, don't Google that. Not safe for work.
Yeah.
Oh, that might have taken it. That might have taken it for me.
Please don't answer that, Josh.
Oh my God.
I get a great audience, don't I?
No doubt. I was in a clubhouse room recently. Sometimes I just go in there and listen. And they were talking about somebody, this Christian apologist, fundamentalist apologist, and like how he was being incredibly rude and misogynistic, and he's like all uptight. And I almost put in the comments, I think he just needs to be pegged. I think it would solve a lot of problems for people like that. That's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Oh man!
All right.
Thank you, who's your buddy?
Try to bring it back.
Yeah.
Adultery is another one of those examples where potentially there could be stoning, but there is, as you read both the Pentateuch and also outside of the Pentateuch, adultery was something that was resolved through family negotiations, and it wasn't taken to the judges, but it was something that was resolved interfamilially. And if there was, say, payment that was required by the harmed or offended, say, spouse, then that was an appropriate measure to take. But it did not result in the death penalty. That was just taken for granted. There's just a recognition that when these punishments are mentioned, it is to have kind of a fear-inducing effect, an avoidance effect, rather than the assumption that these could potentially be carried out. They generally weren't in the ancient Near East, and something.
That's not. Oh God, it's just so. First of all, it's far more nuanced than that, and secondly, it's not relevant to the point here at all. Again, the point that you have to engage with is if you're going to take this stance that if you're going to take this stance that these laws are not normative, I'm really, really excited for you. Like that makes me super happy, right? But then you have to follow through with where that leads you. You have to follow through with it, because you can't have Yahweh giving laws that aren't normative.
Right.
Anyway.
Well, I kind of felt maybe I'm just being a little bit too critical here, but I kind of felt like Copan in that small portion there kind of contradicted himself, because he said at the very beginning that, like, stoning, sometimes that happened, but then it was handled by familial whatever and everything, and then he immediately kind of transitioned into this never happens. Or that it was like an ultra rare thing for it to happen. And it's kind of like he went from admitting that it did happen on occasion to, this was so rare that you could consider it as not happening, is kind of what got communicated to me.
Yeah, I just trying to be clear here. Like, for someone that's going to take a fundamentalist approach to the text, right, and try to make arguments from that interpretive model, you can't just slide away from it whenever you want to say, well, this isn't actually a law that's being given by Yahweh, right? You can't, it's not that easy to slide away from it. And so what I'm noticing here is we're not actually going, I mean, again, these are just the sections. Maybe he went into it in great detail. Did he deal with Leviticus 25, 44 to 46 in great detail?
Not really. I mean, we listened to about half of his of them handling that section, so I mean, it didn't really get better from there. So
I feel like there's so much talk around this about like, this is very much like the hyperbole argument, right? Well, they had ancient Near Eastern war rhetoric. You see some of it in Joshua, so that must be what this all is. It's like my God, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
Anyway.
Okay. I know we're coming up on 2 hours here, but there is one section that I was really wanting to get to, because it's very pertinent for something that I've brought up recently. So we'll go ahead and fast forward to this section. I think that's about it. Okay, here we go.
All right, I can't wait to get that. And here's the next question from there's scholars like Meredith Klein underscore the ubiquitous nature of the suzerain vassal treaties throughout the Middle East. Isn't this a better explanation from women and children who were taken in war via Deuteronomy 20-21 rather than sex slavery and subjugation?
Right. Yeah, you do have in a passage like Deuteronomy 21, there is no sex slavery here. You do have a formal ceremony, a month of mourning of a woman's who's been a prisoner of war, a woman who is saying goodbye to her culture, saying goodbye to her former way of life, shaving her hair, cutting her nails, and so forth. And so there is a saying goodbye to the previous way of life and entering into another culture, another way of life within Israel. And
yeah, so I've recently handled this on my channel when Mike Winger said it, but now Paul Copan has said that there's no sex slavery. And of course, he's not talking about Numbers 31, but definitely the procedures or whatnot that he's talking about would apply to Numbers 31. But this section in Deuteronomy, it's talking about the procedure for taking a woman or pubescent girl as a wife after being captured during war, like a spoil of war. And so like they have to go through this whole procedure of basically marrying them. He kind of laid it out a little bit, cutting their hair, cutting nails, and there's got to be like a month gap in between there. Now, my issue with it is that if you look at scholars outside of this field, like with who did I bring up in my video? It was a guy that wrote a commentary on Roman laws. I can't remember right off the top of my head, but he gave a pretty good definition for how sexual slavery is defined, and it includes forced marriages. And so it kind of seems like in this section that they're saying that, oh, these women were married, they weren't raped, like or they weren't sex slaves, is what he's saying.
I just like Paul define sex slavery. Paul define consent.
Yes,
that's what I want.
Exactly.
I want the definition of sex slavery, and then I want you to give me the definition of consent, and that's it. Once you give me those two things, I'm going to sit and look at you. That's all I'm going to do. I'm just going to sit and stare at you. Be like, work it out, my guy. Like this kills me. Again, if Paul Copan were a woman, I think he'd feel very differently about this. And it frustrates me when I hear people like this say, well, I mean, come on. He had to marry her.
Right. Yeah. So, and just to kind of give you what you were asking for there, which I know that I'm not Paul Copan, but this is the definition that I'm working off of. It comes from Mark Klompberg's commentary on Roman statute. And he's saying that sexual slavery is a particular form of enslavement, which includes limitations on one's autonomy, freedom of movement, and power to decide matters relating to one's sexual activity. Thus, the crime also includes forced marriages, domestic servitude, or other forced labor that ultimately involves forced sexual activity.
Yeah, and once you then define consent, you're fucked. You're fucked if you're trying to argue that this, like, you can't use things like, oh, well, they're war captives. They would be really excited. Like they would be trying to get picked up by one of these Israelites. Do you know what consent is? Do you know what duress is? Like, can you have consent under duress? Like, I get so frustrated by people that try to whitewash things that they should just change their interpretive model. Just change your interpretive model. Like, stop trying to get your value system from an ancient text. Like, stop. Just stop.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I feel like it's incredibly disgusting the way that Paul here is making it out to be like this sort of bittersweet thing. Like these women are like saying goodbye to their culture. They're saying goodbye to their former lives. And it's this bittersweet thing. He kind of romanticizes it. But I mean,
let it happen to him. Let it happen to him. That's what I would say, right? Let some other culture come in here and kill you, right? And kill. I don't even want to say this shit. I don't even want to say it. Like, let it happen to you, and then sit there and say, if I don't even want to say it. I don't even want to say it. You would think very differently if it happened to you. But no, I guarantee you, he won't make apologetics like this for the Neo-Assyrian Empire. He's not going to do it. Not going to do it. Paul, I'm disappointed. I'm sorry. I'm disappointed.
Yeah. Are you okay if we continue with this section?
Yeah. Of course. Sorry.
Okay. No, I mean, I don't want to continue with it if it
No,
I can understand how this would be upsetting.
It's I think it's just such a discredit to women.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this happens so often. And I just hear it over and over and over again from Christian apologists. Sorry. I'm so frustrated. I'm so frustrated for women. This happened in the same clubhouse. I'll just say this. No, but this person, this guy that was being very misogynistic, one of the things that he was doing is every time that he would say to a man that he was lying, and apparently he does this quite a bit, he would say, "You're lying," or "That's not true," or something to that effect. When he would say it to one of these three women, he would say, "Your lying lips," or "That lying mouth of yours." Like, sorry, I'm getting a little in my brain. I don't even know what that means in my brain. I hate it when people defend things that are indefensible, that should be indefensible to them, and use these bullshit arguments like they had a month to mourn.
Mm-hmm.
It's non-consensual forced sex. Period.
Yeah.
That's what it is. And I'm not coming down on the ancient Israelites any more than I'm coming down on the ancient Neo-Assyrians or the ancient Babylonians or whatever. Like, but stop trying to make it say something that it wasn't so that you can somehow base your morality on it and then restrict other people's rights by using that book. Stop. I'm done. Just done.
I completely feel you on that.
Sorry, go ahead.
He goes a little bit more into his argument here, so we'll play this out.
So there is no war rape that takes place, and so there is, and I go into detail on that. I spend time talking about that, and the whole question about war rape, which was common in other nations, but is prohibited within Israel. So there is the possibility, of course, of taking on a wife who is a prisoner of war, but war rape is prohibited, and there's a ceremony that needs to be attended to. That's mentioned in the book of in the book of Deuteronomy.
So the main problem that I have with this section here is that he seems to try to do like an equivocation between these two concepts here of war rape and sexual slavery, as if war rape is the same thing as sexual slavery, as far as like what we're actually talking about. Which, when we talk about the sexual slavery in the Bible, we're talking about forced marriages. We're talking about, the servant girls that are forced to carry their master's babies. We're talking about that. We're not talking about like prisoners of war being raped. I say willy nilly. I don't mean for it to sound silly, but like just they're just rape. They're just raped. For the hell of it, I guess. That's not what we're talking about, or anybody's talking about. Like that's not the criticism of the Bible.
The idea, first of all, what's going on in Deuteronomy 21 with the captive bride is a little more nuanced than I think he realizes. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that all that the text is doing, or specifically what the text is doing, is saying you can't just sleep with a captive. Let's assume, for the sake of argument, that it's saying you can't just sleep with the captive, you have to marry her first.
Yeah, I'm hearing an absent of consent in that as well.
Just stop and think about it for a sec, Paul. Just give it a little think. I just don't understand. I don't understand. I mean, I do. And that's why it makes me so frustrated.
Yeah. And then, Mike Winger, he says that they can either, like these women or pubescent girl prisoners of war can either become servants or they can become wives. So they really have a choice.
Jesus Christ. Oh my God. Again, this is, you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can either say, like during the Neo-Babylonian Empire, and I haven't read about this, and Don Damayev has a huge volume on the Neo-Babylonian Empire and slavery in it. But I think during the Neo-Babylonian Empire, a lot of chattel slavery just went out the window. And in fact, I think a lot of debt slavery went out the window as well. There's something else that developed. But like, let's assume that's the case, right? Just because I can't remember exactly what it was. It's better. It sounds better, right? Is this does that make it good? I don't understand. Like this argument that, well, look, the other nations around, they didn't have laws about raping women on the battlefield. But Israel had a law. You had to marry him. As my old archaeology professor used to say, when you would say something sort of stupid in class, I heard it a lot. He would say, yeah. And that's what I want to say in these moments, channeling Glenn Schwartz. Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little fiery tonight. I just don't like it when women get treated like this. And I guarantee you, I guarantee you, Paul has no idea that what he's saying is so hurtful to so many of the women watching right now. I guarantee it. I mean, I can't guarantee because I don't know his brain, but I would imagine so. Because when I was an evangelical, I would not have thought in these terms. I would have actually thought this was a good thing. That's why it's so scary.
Right. So I do have one small section that I want to go through. This wasn't all that I pulled out of it, but it's all that we're going to have time for tonight. This part right here is actually coming from Praise himself. So it's not Paul Copan.
Okay.
But it's Praise saying it. Copan doesn't seem to disagree, though.
There's archaeological evidence. We have a bunch of treaties that were Israel made with other nations and stuff. like vassal treaties,
Right.
like
Like
in
the
the
Hittite
case of
treaties and so forth.
yes, yeah. So I think they would hold to these agreements, and then like these agreements, like they could never rape anyone or anything like that, because they're why would anyone agree that to be raped? Like this, that doesn't make any sense. So I think the skeptics really need to look towards that direction.
What did he say? So did he say because they made a treaty with a nation
that they wouldn't rape, apparently, because who would choose to be raped?
Sorry, the women of the country. Is that what he's saying? The women of the country are standing there. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, and they're saying, "We like this treaty. I'm like, cast my vote to sign this treaty because that can't be what he's saying. He's got to be. I must be misunderstanding.
Let's replay it now. This is pretty much. I only went forward just maybe like a few seconds to get past Copan. So I guess we could start from the beginning and praise this section and re-listen to it.
Yes, and there's archaeological evidence. We have a bunch of treaties that were Israel made with other nations and stuff, like vassal treaties,
right.
like
in the Hittite treaties and so forth.
Yes, yeah. So I think they would hold to these agreements, and then like these agreements, like they could never rape anyone or anything like that, because they're why would anyone agree that to be raped? Like this, that doesn't make any sense.
I don't understand the argument.
Well, yeah, I'm not exactly sure because it's following, on with the whole sex slavery thing.
Sure.
And so, like, I think he's trying to suggest that there were agreements between Israelites and other nations, and that's the reason why they didn't do war rapes, or they didn't force women into sexual slavery, because, like, why would a state choose to have their women raped or something? Maybe I don't know.
Okay, I mean, there any number of problems, but the one that comes to mind is an equivocation on the term rape.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, how are you using it? If you are saying that by their lights it was not rape, that's one thing. If you are saying by our lights it's not rape, that's another. Right? And that's a very, very important thing to identify. So if you are arguing, well, Deuteronomy 21 is not about rape or sex slavery, by whose lights? Right? By our definition or by their definition? And actually, I hope I'm using that phrase correctly, by one's lights. But the point is that if you're saying that from an ancient perspective, from the Israelites' perspective, or from the scribe or the priest that's putting this down, from their perspective, it's not rape. That's fine. That's we can talk about it. But we have to stay there in that perspective. In the same way that we can't say beating a child with a wooden rod is abuse, therefore, in their minds, they knew they were abusing their children.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. Right? We can't say, I love my child, therefore I would not beat them with a wooden rod, which I hope at least most of us would say that. I'm not naive enough to think that all of us do. But therefore, in the Proverbs, that writer did not love their child because they advocated for beating a child with a wooden rod. That doesn't work. Right? You have to maintain, you can't equivocate that way. And that's what I hear happening so much in this conversation, just in the bits that I've heard. So that's just one of the problems. Like, it's not rape because they didn't think it was rape. It doesn't work that way. It does. Like, would we say it's okay to perform genocide on a nation? Like, was it cool that the Middle Assyrian or the Neo-Assyrian empires killed huge groups of people and took captive and displaced huge groups of people because they worshiped the wrong god? Right? I mean, or they rebelled against wanting to be subjugated. Is that okay? No, of course it's not. But they thought it was. The Neo-Assyrian king thought it was. That was good. It just like this. How does this work? It's just this doesn't work.
I agree. It doesn't work. There's a little bit left here where I think he's going to get into the meat of what I was wanting him to say, or well, the section is meant to convey.
So I think the skeptics really need to look towards that direction rather than this like imposed slavery. I just don't think it was imposed. There was nothing imposed back then.
So Josh, I don't know if you know this, but there was no imposed slavery. There was no imposed sex slavery, and there was no imposed, I guess, rape.
I'm like, I guess I'd have to ask him how he's defining these terms in order to know exactly what he's saying. But I mean, given the common usage of the term impose, like one of the main points of my discussion on Exodus 21:7 through 11, where it talks about the Amah, the female slave, the daughter that's sold probably as a concubine, is that it has nothing to do with her consent. Her consent, it's not even a thing. It's an anachronism, right? There is that. Nobody cares about her consent. That's not an issue, right? Her father and the creditor are negotiating terms, right? She's a commodity in this. So, like, and even to hear apologists try to talk their way out of that, that the reason that she has an elevated status is because she's being used sexually, right? Like, so because she's being what's the word that they translate it? Deflowered, right? Because she's being used sexually, she has lost value in that culture. And so her status has to be at least slightly elevated to accommodate that. And that's why the text goes on to talk about, like, you can't just sell her to a foreign nation because she's had her status elevated. And if you decide to get rid of her, you can't, or if you decide you don't, want her as a concubine or want her as a wife, whichever one is actually in play there, that you can't just deprive her of the things, the three things that are talked about in the text. Can't just, because if you do, you have to let her be redeemed back by her family, right? Are we okay with that? Like, I hope to God not. But the difference is that what you're talking about, and this is not just like liberal scholars saying this, just go to your local seminary or something and go to the commentary section and just read through 10 commentaries on Leviticus, or on Exodus. Just go do it, right? And read through the sections and look at what they say and look up the bibliographic citations. Like, if you're an apologist, hopefully you will be astonished, because that was the point of my book, is to just say, this is what scholars say about this shit. Sorry, I'm just rambling now.
Oh, you're totally fine. So that was all that we were going to be able to get to tonight. Although they do have an extensive section on the New Testament, which I think is something that you go through in Volume 2, at least a little bit. So I don't know if maybe you would want to do another stream covering New Testament comments about slavery and stuff like that, because they cover things that you directly cover in your book. So
yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah. We do have a few super chats here, though. We got JH that says, "Good talk, Josh. You're a chill dude. I have both Old Testament books. I'd love to see you converse, not debate with Rabbi Singer or Rabbi Skobach. Skobach? No, Skobach. I don't. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Don't get pegged, bro. It hurts. Just kidding. I feel like they know from experience."
Yeah, it's I don't know how productive those conversations would be. I'd have to think about that. Because those are sensitive conversations, I think. Anyway, sorry.
No, you're fine.
But I appreciate the compliment. It was very nice.
Yeah. Cynthia McDonald says, "Dr. Josh, what were you reading earlier that read like biblical law into U.S. chattel slavery?"
Let me just go pull it off the shelf. I know that that Heathen Queen and both, I think Casey as well, put it in. But let me just go grab it so everybody can see it. Hang on.
Yeah. So Cynthia, I don't know if you're still around, but I know earlier in the chat, Kate. Oh, she did. Oh, okay. That was about 30 minutes ago. So. Yeah, he has.
Okay, sorry. So it's Thomas Morris, Southern Slavery and the Law, 1619 to 1860. And it's not a short read. I've highlighted the hell out of it. But this, and there are several other books on my shelf that I used in writing that section. It's like maybe a 5 or 6 page section in volume 1 of the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament on the Antebellum South, and seeing if that thing that he almost said tonight, about Antebellum South and the Hebrew Bible being completely different in the legal sections. But yeah, it's a good book. It's a good book.
Yeah. Casey just put the link back in the chat in case anybody
perfect.
wants to, if anybody wants to get that. And I'll have a link in the description, which if you guys don't know, I have links in the description now for all of Josh's books that are relevant to the discussion tonight. So, if you don't have them yet, definitely go and check them out. Next up, we got Jason Kolisak, who says, "Didn't we review an apologist who had a pegboard?" Maybe, I don't know. I can't remember if we have or not. Probably. I mean, I've done a lot of videos.
Just so it's clear, like, I'm in no way referring to pegging as a bad thing, right? I think that that there should be no shame whatsoever with sexual things that consenting adults do. In fact, I think I really meant that. Like, I think that there are certain people in the apologetics community that would learn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Particularly about things like consent.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Hoosier Buddy says it just sounds like a distinction without a difference. I think that they were, let's see, that was right about the 9 o'clock spot. So it was probably, I think we were talking about one of the equivocations that they were making. So thank you so much there, Hoosier Buddy. And then finally, we've got Heathen Queen, who said, "I've been essayed by a friend. Men have no idea what it feels like to have your autonomy forcibly taken and then having to be nice to them."
So I'm assuming as a sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
God, I just, I am so sorry. Yeah, it's just, I don't have words. It's
Yeah, I can't imagine being put in that kind of position. I don't know if I would have the emotional stability to actually handle that particular position. So I hate that for you there, Heathen Queen, and I wish you hadn't have had to go through that.
Yeah.
So I hate that for you. But I believe that was that looks like it's all of the super chats for tonight. I do really appreciate you, Dr. Josh, for stopping by, talking about this. You know, I hate that the one section really kind of got you upset, but I mean, I think that everybody should be upset by somebody
Yes.
making those kinds of arguments.
This was important. This was
Yes.
important.
I very much feel like it is, because I know that Paul Copan is you know, a pretty, I don't know if you could say a big figure in I guess scholarship, like a biblical scholarship, but I mean, people are using scholars like Paul Copan and others in order to make the arguments that they do online, and you know, I don't know. I hate the doublespeak that came out of it, and I definitely wasn't convinced by their stream that the Bible doesn't support chattel slavery. It just, to me, it makes it seem like apologists are willing to go whatever distance they need to in order to make the Bible sound like a better book than it is.
And this is, for me, this is the, I was an evangelical Christian for 26 years, right? And I pastored a church for 7 of those. I know what it's like to make these arguments, right? I went to a very fundamentalist evangelical school for my bachelor's degree, and then again for my master's degree. So I'm not in any way suggesting that that Paul Copan in this video is like knowingly trying to be hurtful to women or something. That's not. I don't think this is an intentional thing, because there's no way that, because I would have said all these same things when I was still an evangelical. And there's no way that I would have knowingly been trying to hurt anyone. What I hope people get from this is, if you are in one of these positions where you're making these kinds of arguments, take a step back and think about it from the position of the oppressed. Right? This is what the Bible talks about, right? You bringing up these verses about the foreigner, the ger. These are very, very often along with the widow and the orphan. It's talking about the oppressed people. Try to think of it from their perspective. Try to think about what it would be like for a woman who's just had her family killed in front of her in a war, to be taken off to another land and forced to marry one of the soldiers of the army that just killed her family. And think, would a month of grieving do it for me? Like, let's try to put ourselves in the shoes of the oppressed. Let's do better. And I am, like, I'm a cis white male, right? I have had a lot of advantages. G and I both have had a lot of advantages that people of color don't, that women don't, like minorities don't. Like, I think we need to use our voices to amplify the voices of minorities, and that includes in this conversation women. That is very specifically women. We need to amplify their voices, not try to squash down these passages that are misogynistic from our perspective today, from what we know, from our advancements in morality, like, or our moral progression or whatever. Like, it's so dangerous and it's so hurtful, and it further oppresses. And just stop. Okay, I'm done.
No, I totally agree with everything that you just said. And I mean, I've heard similar arguments, you know, I guess similar ways of thinking, really, coming from apologists online and everything like that, that try to argue against the whole idea of like marital rape. And they use similar lines of logic that, you know, Praise and Paul here used with their, you know, forcing women into marriage, and how that's not, you know, forced sexual intimacy or forced sexual contact or whatever. You know, there is this concept in Christianity that, you know, wives can't be raped, and it's really harmful to not only women in the faith, but, you know, just I feel like to everybody in general. So I'm right there with you, Josh. Cynthia McDonald said that was righteous indignation that Josh felt. Now I think that's a way better way to characterize it than I did. So I definitely feel you on that. I guess maybe you know, I've had to hear arguments like this so much that whenever I do hear them, I'm bewildered.
Yeah.
And I just sit there and I'm just like, did he really make that argument? What the fuck?
Yeah.
Like, kind of thing. So I definitely tell you. Now, we do have some complaints in the chat. Okay.
Oh.
We got some complaints there, Josh.
All right.
Centered around you.
I'm ready. Yeah.
All right. And then Heathen Queen saying, I feel like I paid for it, but I guess I'll have to wait.
Oh my God. Okay.
Oh, there he goes. Now Josh is shirtless.
There you go. You get to see all the whiteness that is my shoulders. Yes, a body that never sees the sun. There you are.
Yeah. Although somebody else put into the chat a very important distinction here, that 2 does not equal 100, which is you know, kind of what was stipulated there, but you know, whatever. No, I will not be taking my shirt off, by the way. Anyways, thank you so much, Josh, for joining me tonight, taking a good bit, you know, of time out of your lovely Saturday night to discuss this kind of, I guess, somewhat horrible shit with me. Do you want to tell everybody where they can find you, you know, what you do and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, my OnlyFans page. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, we're over at Digital Hammurabi. Yeah, so any of the books are on Amazon. So, yeah. Sorry, I feel really weird now. There you go.
Yeah, we're gonna go on ahead and get on out of here. Everybody, be sure to smash that like button, share it all out. Tease it with Josh being shirtless at the end, I guess. And I guess we will see you guys on Monday when we've got 3 reasons why you should trust that the Gospels are historically accurate. So we're going to be taking a look at that. But we will see everybody later. Y'all have an awesome rest of your weekend, and we will see you guys Monday.